And the first question I'd like to ask you, Zarna, I will start with you. What major accomplishment have you had, or plural, have you had this past year?
Oof, there's a lot to talk about, but the one I'll focus on just for this question is launching my 1,000 Years of Hindu Colonial Trauma presentation. I've been working on it for 4 years. And so this was the culmination of 4 years of research, often devastating research because of the things that I found out, the things that I already knew that I had confirmed, but then learned a whole bunch of other things about. And then other things that I thought I knew, I thought I understood, and I actually didn't understand at all. And putting it all together, then putting it together in a way that I could explain it to others, and in particular could explain it to the social justice movement, was a lot of labor. And it was a labor of love, of course, because this is my own people, my own ancestors, my own family, and also my planet, my Mother Earth, my movement. And so putting that together for you all was huge for me. And then being able to finally actually release it, which I was only able to do with FTP support. FTP was such a backbone. The fact that I was able to get my website up and running happened because Dante Garcia, our board member, was able to help me in putting that together. There's so much of the support that I got from the board. Before it went public, everyone in the board watched the whole thing so that they knew what I was about to put out. And they knew that, if people asked questions about it, they would be informed enough to be able to say, this is what this project is about. This is how long she's worked on it. This is where you can go and find it. So thank you so much to FTP for that. And I'll hand it over to Sondra for should I hand it over to Yolotli, the same question? Sondra, you're on mute.
It's a very powerful series, and Yolotli, achievements of this past year would be lovely to hear from you.
Thank you, everyone. I hope you can still hear me well. Yeah, this year I was blessed to be accepted into 2 community programs called the Vivian Barnett Fellowship and the Come Through Market. The Vivian Barnett Fellowship has allowed me to learn about changing food systems regionally while building fellowship with people of color in my community, in our community. And the Company Market has allowed me to learn how to build a community-supported business that's going to help Merck become financially stable as an organization, which will allow other participants to get involved, and which will help incentivize participation itself to stay active. The other way around is basically come show up as you can as a volunteer and still survive capitalism. So yeah, pretty excited about that. And another thing I'm really blessed for is avoiding prison time for an action that happened a while ago. I'm really blessed by this activist firm. It's legal firm that helped me get out of that situation and continue to work for the People's Climate Justice Movement. So thank you for everyone being here. FTP. Yeah, pass it back to Sondra.
Thank you, Yolotli. And Derek, love to hear a little bit of the achievements you've had of this past year.
Sure, great, thanks. I'll just pick one of many. It's so exciting. I'm so glad to be here, able to share to each and every one of you just one quick story of dozens. It's just been such an incredibly powerful year. So the youth that I mentor, the United Student Leaders, had worked for over a year to get the city of Langley to declare a climate emergency. And in May, the city council voted unanimously to declare a climate emergency, and then continued to work with the youth on a draft resolution that the youth drafted. And it was adopted formally. The resolution was passed in June, and the city of Langley on Whidbey Island became the 6th local government or tribe in Washington state to have declared a climate emergency. So it's something that hasn't happened a whole lot in Washington, and is now one more. And they are now going after Island County and hoping to get the whole county to declare a climate emergency, which would be the first county in Washington state to do that if they do. And keeping in mind that that this achievement has Langley joining thousands of cities and counties worldwide.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that, Derek. I'm going to keep following up with you, Derek, with another question. Is there a kind of work that you are expanding to or pivoting to in 2022?
Absolutely. I've been really doing some inner reflection and trying to understand how and where I'm called to show up. And so far, because of the far right pushback against public education and the kind of after effects of basically an assault on democracy throughout the United States right now, I've been really having to challenge myself to, or just continue to resist that. But what I'm called to in 2022 is really to lean into the just transition, and let's go for it on building the regenerative economy that we all know we need. And I feel that the anti-racism work, the self-work, the anti-patriarchy work, building organizations like the United Student Leaders and others that I've been involved in, we're now really well positioned to take the next step. And I'm really excited to really focus on how do we build the regenerative economy and how do we educate the community about the just transition framework and really provide opportunities for people to learn. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Yolotli, is there anything particular that you're looking at expanding to in this next year?
Yeah, thank you. I actually am in access to a plant.
Can you speak a little closer to your mic if possible?
I'm actually in access to a greenhouse in the J district, and I'm looking forward to build it as a plant nursery to get more people involved with education and increase funding to MERP itself with a consignment deal to the Symbiop Garden Center on Powell in Portland. And another thing I'm excited for is the organizer's manual to activate more people with MERP and educate people how to lead themselves in the climate justice movement as urban farmers.
Thank you. And Zarna, this coming year, what do you have on the horizon? And you're on mute.
Thanks.
The pot calling the kettle black.
So yeah, my focus for 2022, so much of what we do is always intertwined, so many different systems of oppression all working simultaneously. And so I'm going to be pushing an anti-imperial narrative, which is also deeply connected to Hindu colonial trauma, because in the West and in the Western social justice movement, we think of history in terms of the last 500 years, and we think of history in terms of the last 500 years about this continent. And we don't understand that in order to genuinely understand anti-imperialism, you can't look at it in terms of centuries, you have to look at it in terms of millennia. Which is why my presentation is about 1,000 years of Hindu colonial trauma. And even that, you have to go further back in order to understand what the world was like 2,000 years ago even. And when you do that, you start to see the patterns and rhythms of empires on a global scale, not just one empire, multiple empires operating simultaneously, and how they move, how they work together. And when you understand that, you can begin to predict what they'll do. And if you can begin to predict what they'll do, you can actually come up with a genuine action plan that would interrupt what they're doing. So that's my pivot in 2022. And I mean, it's not really a pivot. I've been doing this the whole time, but the way I'm pivoting is that I'm moving myself out of Facebook, and I'm going to move myself much further into podcasting and educating people in a closer and more genuine, intimate way about the rhythms and the patterns of imperialism, and to do that in a way that we can actually work together to dismantle it, because we have to stop war. Mother Earth cannot take any more war. We cannot afford it. We cannot bear it, not on our bodies, not on our planet. And so that is something I've been working on for years, but this is where I'm going.
Wonderful. Thank you. And let me ask you another question. What financial or other support do you need? What obstacles do you see in your way that would be helpful for you to get further in your work?
Was that for me?
Yes.
So one of the things that would actually be really helpful is I'm needing to get equipment so that I can actually start doing podcasting in a more professional way, to try to reach more people so that I can bring them this education. So that would be really helpful to me, is to actually get resources to be able to get the right equipment for that. Another thing that I would love is if I had more resources, I'd be able to hire translators to put my Hindu colonial trauma presentation and to translate that into different languages, because I have had requests from people in the immigration justice movement to actually have this translated into Spanish, because so many of their people also want to learn. Because what people are starting to realize now is how deeply integral Hindu colonial trauma is to their trauma, because they are starting to realize finally, wait a minute, the only reason why the white Europeans came looking for us is because they were looking for India. And why were they looking for India? It's because India had already, for the last 500 years previous to that, been looted by colonizers. And if we don't understand the integral connections of that, of how it's connected to Black liberation, how it's connected to queer and trans liberation, how it's connected to immigration justice, to border justice, to all of these different things. So in translating it to lots of different languages, we can reach so many more people and so many different liberation movements.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And Derek, if you had a magic wand or financial support or other support to move your projects further, what would that look like?
Yeah, thanks. I think what would help is to be able to transition some of the administrative and development kind of tasks that are a necessary part of running everything, so that I could be more freed up to focus on the projects. And the other thing that I think would be really helpful would be thought partners, people to like talk deeply about some of these concepts and find ways to document it and contextualize it. And then the third thing that'd be really helpful would be to have people who have connections to accountable groups and other organizers, and try and build more of a network. We already have a really good network. I'm really excited about the co-sponsors of the event here, and I'm really excited about the people who support many of the other groups that we're involved in, but I'd like to see that grow much more significantly and have many more groups in the network, maybe pushing upwards of 50.
Great. I like that. Thank you for sharing that. And Yolotli, if you had a magic wand or more support, what would that allow you to do?
Yeah, just perhaps the community can know about MERP's purpose and mission. Just reading that alone would be really helpful. And if you had access to land or a church that has a lot of land in the city, perhaps I can be hosted on that site to build a homestead and create a resource base for the movement with MERP. And we can do this for the People's Climate Justice Movement. Right now, I don't really have a stable place to build this kind of thing, and I don't have stable housing. So it would be really unique if there was a host out there that understood the mission of MERP, be hosted on that piece of land, grow food, build a small, tiny homestead, or what have you as a resource base for the movement. Thank you.
Thank you. And Yolotli, one other question. It seems in some ways obvious, this question, but I just wonder if you have any thoughts about it. Our values, our unifying value for the people is climate justice. So can you talk a little bit about how your work is really impacting that?
Yeah, I can't say the specific stats on it, but basically if we can cooperatize and hyper-localize our food systems, then we can be ready for the coming years of runaway climate change. And also for me, I think it's very imperative to think about how can we create food security in time of climate crisis, because bottom line is food's going to get real difficult. Food's already getting more expensive. So therefore, I think that's what I can do as a community supported organizer for the people organization, building food systems for the future of everyone involved.
That's very powerful. Thank you, Yolotli. And Zarna, can you talk a little bit about your connection to climate justice?
Thank you. Yes, this is such a critical question because, so many people just don't know how to put Hindu colonial trauma into that framework. And what they don't know is that when we're talking about climate change and systems of oppression, one system of oppression that underpins everything when it comes to climate change is Hindu phobia. Because, and here's an example, the Amazon rainforest, which we've all seen go up in flames for the last several years now in these horrific wildfires. What most people don't realize is that so much of the Amazon rainforest is being devastated and has been devastated because it's being cut down to make way for cattle ranching. What they don't know about that cattle ranching is that the cows that they have in Brazil were stolen from Hindus of India. And this isn't a modern thing. This has been going on for centuries because those cows are indigenous cows sacred to Hindus who are indigenous people. So it's not just the devastation of the Amazon rainforest, it's the devastation of Hindus. And it's only because of Hindu phobia that the white man thought that they could just take whatever was ours and then mock us and demonize us for holding sacred an animal that we knew if this cow, if this animal is eaten by people, it will devastate Mother Earth. And when we look at the numbers of agriculture and how much greenhouse gas emissions come from that, the one agricultural type that causes the most damage is the beef agricultural system. That's the one system. And no one in the West understands that that whole thing is underpinned by Hindu phobia, because even the cows that you eat on this continent, in North America, they came from India too. They were stolen from Hindus as well.
Wow.
So that's just one example.
Thank you. Thank you. And Derek, we have about 30 seconds. Is there a way that you can summarize things briefly?
Sure. Yeah. About climate justice. I think I'll just provide one example. Obviously we're hearing about all these intersections, and I was going to give two examples. I'll just give one, and that's really education. And so in the field of formal education, kindergarten through 12th grade, formal education as one of several examples within education, you don't really hear, historically, you wouldn't assume or expect that climate justice is something that would be discussed in the classroom, in the administration and school boards, at the state office of the superintendent. But what I've started to see is that really shifting. And I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, it is. Great. It's so encompassing. Thank you all for sharing that information. And I'm going to hand it back to Dante.